Hello and welcome to Hops and Bros.
Very special episode this week. That's how we start videos usually, right?
Pretty much.
For an open window on a crafty world. Max and Chris from Ups and Brews. Ups and Brews. Welcome to Ups and Brews.
All right, so this week we're taking a look at the Reinheitsgebot, the purity law of German beers.
Which is probably one of the subjects I have a lot of issues talking about because I mostly don't know shit about it. And I have a lot of trouble writing the actual name to do the research and pronouncing it at the same time.
Reinheitsgebot. Yeah.
Reinheitsgebot.
I had
It's
a very
crazy.
hard time. The first couple of weeks in school, they would talk about the purity law. They would say Reinheitsgebot. I had a really hard time pronouncing it as well. It's not one of those easy words. I find in the brewing industry, there's a lot of German terms because they really revolutionized and perfected the art of brewing, which this law kind of falls into. It's a purity law, but it's also a law to keep their beers pure and efficient.
For a specific reason.
For a specific reason. Chris, where does this law come from?
It turns us, so take us back many years ago. April 23rd, 1516 in Bavaria. I wrote Northeast Germany, but it's southeast.
It's southeast?
It's southeast. Yeah. I literally looked down, I'm like, it's Northeast, but it's southeast. Dumb me. But first off, this law was made to limit beer to production with barley, hops, and water. Because back in the day, they didn't know about yeast.
Yeah, yeast was just something that happened when you made beer.
Exactly.
It's not until way down the line where they invented the microscope and they started seeing that, there's something else in here. There's an organism working. And it's not until later on that they figured out what was happening. Because back then they believed in spontaneous apparition. So same thing with maggots and meat. They would think they would just pop out of the air just randomly. And same thing with yeast. They thought it was just something that happened when you would ferment. Until later, where they discovered that there was actually a correlation between the yeast, the sugar, the alcohol, and the CO2 produced in that fermentation process. Anyways.
So that's when magic transformed into science.
Yeah. Well, I mean, science and magic were pretty close back then as well.
I think they're
different
still
terms.
close.
Oh, yeah.
So all that was created back in the day to limit the competition in prices between barley, rye, wheat in the production process. It was to help the German people having affordable bread on the table. So it was limiting the prices or the usage of barley for beer and then rye and wheat for bread.
Because when you think brewing, barley is actually the perfect grain to use while brewing because it has a husk. Not a lot of grains actually keep their husks. Wheat, for example, does not. Same thing with rye, which makes them very difficult to work with. Barley's perfect. But if you want more head retention, if you want more body in your beer, wheat is really nice to have as well. And brewers back then would use pretty much any grain. By limiting the grain to the prime beer grain, barley, you were helping the brewing industry and you were also helping the food industry in this case.
Maybe it saved Germany at one point.
I think it did. I think it came from a need to be able to limit both consumptions for sure.
From all the research I made on the historical part, of course, it's very implemented into the German way of brewing, their techniques, just the styles they are brewing, very influenced by that. Max, you just came back from Germany.
I just came back from Germany.
How does Reinheitsgebot impact the beer industry out there in Germany?
A lot. It impacts it a lot. So in Germany, while I was there, I only had two types of beers. I had a lot of lagers, a lot of Helles and Pilsners. It also had a lot of wheat beers, which does not fall under the Reinheitsgebot, or does not fall under the original Reinheitsgebot, but it was amended. And the amendment included yeast, and it also included malts instead of barley. So the original one only stated barley, didn't specify even malts. By specifying malts, it means that as long as you malt your other grains, you can actually use them in your beer. So they do use rye and spelt and wheat in their products.
Which is exciting.
It's very exciting. It kind of, well, I mean, even when the original purity law was in effect, the one from 1516, they would still use wheat because the nobility had a liking towards wheat beers. They would still use it. It was just technically against the law.
Yeah.
Nowadays, every single brewery I've been to and every expert I've talked to over there, they kind of see the purity law as a daily kind of concept where they always have to think, oh, this beer is either purity law compliant or not. They still can produce a beer that is technically not part of the purity law, but they can't call it a beer. It is a malt beverage at that point.
Oh.
So we visited Weirman's, which is one of the greatest grain suppliers out there. Shout out to Weirman's. You're not trying to get anything from them.
No, but Weirman's, if you want to team up to everyone on malt, we'll do it.
We'll definitely do it for sure. Anything you guys need. So anyways, we were there, and they have a brewery on site to be able to test a bunch of malts. And their main series is Reinheitsgebot compliant. They can sell it. Everything's good, but they also have an experimental series. Because I mean, if you're doing malts, if you're doing beers for your suppliers, for your clients, they're gonna want to brew other things than just German purity law beers. Yeah. They're gonna want to make IPAs that have a bunch of wacky things in it, fruits and whatnot. So that series cannot legally be called beer. It's a malt beverage.
And we have the same, I don't want to say issue, but same situation in Brazil. We're getting sidetracked a lot on this one, but I talk a lot about that with Alex from Due to Brejo, because he told me that most of the recipes in Brazil, before they get commercialized, they need to be approved by the government.
Oh, no way.
So if it's not beer compliant, if there's too much adjuncts, then you can't name it beer.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So they can't do a milkshake IPA because it's not considered beer enough.
That is, it's kind of weird. I get it, because some of the products we have on the market now in Canada really go far from what beer actually is. And as soon as you start using a lot of enzymes that can brew IPAs, it's still a beer. You're still just using other enzymes, but is it the same product, same craft product as what you think you're having? It's different. It does have a different kind of category where it's less pure, which is why I do respect the Reinheitsgebot in that way. It gets kind of squirrely in other ways, in the sense that they can't use a lot of hop extracts, a lot of those kind of elements that will limit the amount of trub in your beer.
Can they play around with different variations of hop? Like, let's say you play with pellets, full cones, and lupulin powder. Can they play with that, or it's not considered as? So
yes and no. There's some that they can, some that they can't. If it's pre-isomerized, they can't use it. So as soon as the process makes it so that the hop is already producing more bitterness, it's already iso positive, they can't use it if it's processed. So anything that's processed before entering the beer is a big no-no. But they can do CO2 extracted hops. Okay. That's okay, because it's not processed, it's not isomerized.
So you still need to have kind of like the pure product. Purity, exactly. Right?
It's got to be a pure product to go in to be able to create a pure product.
God damn it. That's crazy.
But again, there's a couple schools that are kind of looking at other options, and they're not shying away from trying other things. Even though they can't call it beer, they're still testing out to see how they can push it more. I had a lot of different reactions when people were talking about this purity law, the Reinheitsgebot. A lot of people were either very for it, or you could see that they weren't quite as for it. It seems to be that the more scientifically inclined the brewer is, the less he's for it, because he understands that there's many ways to get a great product. And the more pure the brewer is, the more he's going to be for the purity law.
So old school versus new school.
Old school versus new school. Yeah. But I guess that's the Reinheitsgebot in a nutshell.
In a nutshell, and speaking of nutshells, I want to point out here in Canada, if you want to try a Reinheitsgebot certified beer, then look further, no more. There's a good one.
Look no further then.
Yeah, exactly. That's I think there's 2 in Canada doing it.
Further no more.
One in Okanagan Springs, and sorry, and Steam Whistle out there in Toronto is Reinheitsgebot certified.
It's kind of cool. This is
Yeah.
really, really interesting. And I'm sure, like, that's the thing, is a lot of breweries are probably producing Reinheitsgebot beers for sure.
Vruden, here in Quebec, I'm pretty sure.
I mean, they must.
They must.
But I mean, as soon as you do a little bit of water chemistry, depending on how you do your water chemistry, it does affect the Reinheitsgebot as well. So you got to be careful about that. If you use any sulfites in your water, it doesn't go through the purity law. So there's a lot of amendment, but there's a lot of don't ask, don't tell.
Okay.
A lot of people I talk to, they try something and they do it and they see if it passes or not.
It's like mafia, right?
Like the mafia. Ooh, I guess. Anyways, if you like the video, please leave a like, subscribe, share it, and we'll see you in the next one.
And
Cheers.
Cheers, Max, for stopping by for this quick little video. It's always fun to have you on the set. You know, it's
happens when it happens.
God damn.
Cool.
Qu'est-ce que c'est facile à deux.
Ouais, c'est plus fluide.
Ouais.
Ah shit, ça reconnait pas.
Ouais.